tell you a funny Cliff Richard story. I don't think I've even told Bryan this. I was in Australia with another client of mine, Bryan Ferry.
Bryan Ferrari, his name,
Bryan
isn't it?
Ferrari, indeed.
Yes, relations.
We're out promoting whatever Bryan had out at the time, and we're doing tellies and all the rest of them. And Cliff was on tour in Australia, and there was a hotel in Sydney which some of us, I think, on
the Feeble Townhouse.
Feeble Townhouse, known fondly as the Seaman Townhouse.
Yeah, in the middle of King's Cross.
Yeah, Cross, exactly. And Cliff's staying there with his band and so on. And Bryan and I get back late one evening, and we go into the restaurant there, and it's empty except for a long table set up against the wall where David Bryce, you're going to have to correct me. Right, David was celebrating his whatever birthday it was. Anyway, Bryan and I go and sit at another table, and we're about to order, and Bryan spots Cliff, or as Bryan and I call him, Spliff Dickard, and being the two things that he'll never understand. And Bryan says to me, "Do you know him?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Oh, I'd love to meet him. I'd love to meet him." And at that moment, David came over to the table and said hello to me. And he said, "It's my birthday. Would you like to join us?" So, of course, Ferry can't believe his luck. We're going to get. And I said to Bryan, just before we went over, I said, "Listen, just one thing, don't swear. And if it's a choice between God and tennis, talk about tennis." So we go over and we sit down, and Cliff is against the wall. He's got his back to the wall, and he's got various band members, and I think a couple of the backing singers were sitting there. We're sitting opposite. We get some food. We're having a really nice time, and suddenly the door of the restaurant flies open, and staggering into the room comes Joe Bugner, heavyweight boxer, and Marlene Bugner, heavyweight boxer's wife. And they are more pissed than any two human beings I've ever seen in my life. And they're standing swaying in the doorway as the rest of us sit there, kind of aware that they've come in, but trying to ignore the fact that they've come in. And suddenly Marlene Bugner goes, "I don't fucking believe it. There's fucking Cliff fucking Richard." And the table goes quiet, and they stagger, and without being invited, they sit down at two spare seats, which are just to my right. And Joe is so pissed that he falls forward onto his plate. And Marlene gets hold of the back of his head, the hair at the back of his head, and starts banging his head on the plate. And the plate cracks because Joe's got a big head. She's smashing it up and down. She's going, "He's going to be no fucking use to me tonight. Look at that fucking... How can I get back if this fucking cunt is..." And she's doing this. And Cliff, of course, is going, "Oh, wow, yeah. Oh, yeah, wow." And David Bryce is playing footsie with one of the backing singers at the top end of the table. And it's all getting very surreal. And Cliff slides out underneath the table. In fact, he disappears under the table, and there are some of us there who are a bit nervous. But anyway, he comes up the other side, and he goes, "I'm going to say good night, everybody." Wow, yeah, wow. And he leaves. Marlene swivels round and spots Bryan. "I don't fucking believe it's Bryan fucking Ferry. Oh, fucking, I fancied him since I was 9 years old. Oh, bloody hell." Joe, of course, is out totally cold on his plate. And Bryan says to me, it was like they were like twins. He says, "Oh, wow. Yeah, wow. I think I should go to bed." As Marlene descends, and one by one, everybody peeled away from the table, leaving the two Bugners there. And when we came down to breakfast the next day, they were still there. Joe was still out and Marlene had joined him. Cliff disappeared. Brian had locked himself in his room.